to become a better deer hunter requires you to actually get boots on the ground and start scouting for deer. Whether you're a beginner just starting out, you have to get out there. I remember I'm 38 years old now. When I was a kid, 10 years old, 11, 12, 13, I was in the woods every single day looking for deer sign. I was into deer hunting and I wanted to know what deer did. And the only way that you can find that out is to actually be there, okay? There's too many people that's relying on some YouTube video or some person to tell them what to do, and people are not thinking for themselves. Now, watching YouTube videos can be very beneficial in a way, you know, to learn how to do a specific thing, right? But you can't rely on what one person is doing on their property because every situation is different. You need to go back to the basics, right? You know, you can watch a YouTube video, learn how to put a food plot in or something like that. But to be an actual hunter, right, you need to figure that out on your own. You need to go back to the basics and think for yourself of what do deer do, okay? What do they do when they feed? What do they do when they bed? The only way to do that is to actually be in the woods, observe it for yourself, and figure it out. And going back to the basics of scouting, you know, looking for deer sign, looking for travel. Look on the ground, you find the prints, the tracks, the droppings, right? As a deer moves along a trail, you follow that trail. Where does that trail go? Now, you know, you figure out what woody browse they're eating. You know, you can easily find this. You know, look at the vegetation, look at the woody browse. You can see it nipped off. That's what the deer are consuming on a daily basis. And too many people are relying on trying to improve their property too much. There is a thing where you can do too many improvements. On these travels that I do with consulting clients, I get to hear about this on a regular basis from, you know, clients where they'll say, hey, I implemented this person's techniques on my property. I also did this, and I also did this, and I also did this, and nothing's working. Well, it's because you improved your property, or you tried to improve it too much. You made it worse because now you can't move around the property. You know, there's this whole thing out there with bedding, you know, bedding areas. Yeah, everybody's talking about bedding. You have to have it on your property. Well, no, you don't have to. If the property is too small, then your primary focus shouldn't be bedding, right? Because if you make a bedding area on it, on a property that's too small, how do you get around your property, right? You can't, because it's not big enough for you to maneuver around there in order to have the bedding on there. So there needs to be a balance with everything. You have to think about, you know, your property specifically. There's only so many things you can do. You can't control on what people do outside of that and what that deer does on the outside of your property. You can only focus on the things that you can do on your own property. How do you maneuver around that property? How, you know, what the deer or how the deer are using your property, and then you can kind of improve that based on that. Where, okay, well, if this deer is using a trail outside of an area that I can't hunt, well, maybe we can block that trail off and, you know, make a new trail to lead them past our bow stand. There's little tweaks that we can do, but there has to be a balance within those improvements. You can't do too much on your property because you can actually, you know, make it worse per se. And you know, there's when I see these properties and stuff, it's just, well, people have, you know, food plots. They planted every species of plant on their property, you know, that they can think of from 10 different companies that sell seed, you know, or they've put in too big of a food plot, too small of a food plot. They planted the wrong seed. You know, a lot of this stuff, because there's so much information out there online, it's hard to know what's true and what's not. And a lot of it is money based. You know, a lot of people will say, you know, you have to plant this specific way. Well, that's because they're being paid by the company to promote that specific method. you know, and that method may not relate to you because you have 5 acres that you can hunt on, and you don't have a $20,000, you know, crimper that you can use on your property, right? So there has to be a balance with all of that, and think for yourself and know what's right and what's wrong based on your situation. Obviously your financial situation, the type of habitat that you have on your property. A lot of this, you know, is different from property to property. It could be 10 miles apart, you know, two different people, two different properties have two completely different situations that they're dealing with, and you need to realize that. But you know, always go back to the basics of, you know, being in the woods and scouting. You know, I get questions. I say this all the time where I go to, you know, like trade shows, or I talk to other hunters, and they'll say, you know, I always say, well, natural browse. You know, you got to have browse on your property in order to hold, you know, the deer for longer periods of time. And you know, browse is the backbone to all deer herds. And the first thing they say is, what are you talking about? What is natural browse? If you don't know what natural browse is, then you really, really need to go back to the basics of being a hunter and realizing how deer actually survive on the food that's provided by Mother Nature. So take that into consideration, and you know, basics of researching on your own and being in the woods and hunting of, you know, basic of deer feed here, deer bed here, how can I hunt them? You intersect them in the middle. You can hunt in the mornings in the bedding, afternoons on the food. How can I get in and out of that? That is your kind of basic scenario of becoming a hunter and realizing what they eat on a daily basis. Any questions, post them down below. I love to help you guys out with this. You know, there's just a lot of information out there, and if you need any help, let me know. I'll see you guys on the next video.